afternoon, everyone. Today is January 25th, 2024. I'm here to present the Q4 update of the Miami Report. After all, December 31st is in the books. We're going to present the differences in the market conditions from Q3 to Q4. I'm Craig Studnicky. I'm the CEO and broker for ISG and related ISG. Today we're filming from the sales office of Shoma Bay. This is the scale model behind me. Fantastic new property in North Bay Village. I encourage you to take a look at what's happening in this little neighborhood of Miami. The transformation is simply remarkable. But with that said, let's get started with the results of Q4. The numbers from the U.S. Census Bureau have come in. So let's start with demand. Sometimes we start with supply. We're going to reverse it today. The U.S. Census Bureau broke out the 4 quadrants of the U.S. And you can see by this graphic, the South is clearly dominating. Last year, Texas surpassed Florida as the fastest growing state in the country. Florida was number 2. I suspect that over the rest of this decade anyway, Florida and Texas are going to be trading positions back and forth because after all, they were the 2 big winners of Tax Reform 17 promoted by former President Donald Trump. And as you can see by the graphic provided to us by the Census Bureau, they include Texas and Florida in the South quadrant of the U.S. Clearly, the South quadrant is dominating all population gains in the U.S. Number 3 last year was North Carolina by some 300 people a day. The gap between 1 and 2 and everyone else is indeed tremendous. In terms of the bottom 3, it's still New York, California, and Illinois. I think last year California was 50 and New York was 49. This year they traded positions. So California and New York may be going through the opposite competition that Florida and Texas are going through for the rest of this decade. But the 3 states that lost the largest amount of people last year were California, New York, and Illinois. No surprise that those are the 3 biggest feeder markets to Florida. In terms of the South Florida population growth, okay, we slipped from number 1 to number 2 by a couple hundred people a day. I'm offering this graphic to give all of you perspective on the sustained population growth of Florida since the turn of this century, since the year 2000. We've been growing at an average of over 800 people a day. The only time we saw any kind of a dip were in the years 2007, 8, 9, and 10, which was all because of the Great Recession of 2008. Yes, it had an effect on the amount of people that could move here. Money was tight. People stayed in place for the most part. But you can see how nicely we recovered. And it was 2015 when we hit the 1,000+ people a day moving to Florida. And now this more or less sustained itself right through 2023. I offer this because even though you may see Florida become number 2 behind Texas, and perhaps this year we pass Texas, this contest between Florida and Texas will remain. But the history of the population growth of Florida since 2000 is impressive and therefore, in my opinion, very, very sustainable. There are lots of reasons why people come here. We've had now close to 180 companies since 2020 agree to move their businesses here to South Florida. I bring these 3 gentlemen up because I think it's indicative of this corporate wave that is happening and to some extent is unending. Let's start with Carl Icahn. Carl Icahn moved to South Florida during 2018, 1 year after Donald Trump's tax reform of 17, when Florida clearly was one of the big winners from that tax reform package. 1 year later, Carl Icahn, who owns one of the biggest hedge funds on Wall Street, moved his entire operation from New York City to Miami. Ken Griffin, the chairman of Citadel. Ken Griffin's been buying property in South Florida for probably over 15 years. He grew up in Boca Raton. He loved South Florida. His office was in Chicago. But the more time he spent in Florida, the more he fell back in love with the weather. It was 2021 when he made the decision to uproot his entire organization, Citadel, from the city of Chicago, bring him to Miami. Now let's go to Jeff Bezos, the chairman of Amazon. Jeff, like Ken Griffin, grew up in South Florida, but he's been living in Seattle, Washington now for years and years and years. And why? Well, that's the world headquarters of Amazon. But the chairman of Amazon, Mr. Bezos, has recently relocated, he and his wife, to Miami. They own a beautiful home in Indian Creek, right on Miami Beach. Am I suggesting that because the chairman of Amazon has relocated to Miami, that the corporate headquarters of Amazon may follow the decision of Ken Griffin of Citadel and Carl Icahn of Icahn Enterprises? Yeah, I'm suggesting it because it's happened before and it will happen again. You've got these 3 titans of industry relocating their lives to South Florida, along with all these other 180 companies, because Miami truly is becoming more of the crossroads of the entire world. You even have Ken Griffin suggesting that we may even replace New York as the 2nd financial capital of the world, accompanying London, of course. So you have a lot of economic reasons why people are moving here. We also know that the weather is nice. That's part of the reason Carl Icahn, Ken Griffin, and Jeff Bezos decided to relocate here. There is perhaps another reason that I would like you to wrap your heads around. The longevity of Florida's population increase is real. And even before Tax Reform 17, individuals were moving here slowly but surely in some impressive numbers. I am borrowing from President John F. Kennedy a message that he gave to the world about the magic of the sea. Please take a listen.
I really don't know why it is that all of us are so committed to the sea. I think it's because, in addition to the fact that the sea changes, and the light changes, and the ships change, it's because we all came from the sea. And it is an interesting biological fact that all of us have in our veins the exact same percentage of salt in our blood that exists in the ocean. And therefore, we have salt in our blood, in our sweat, in our tears. We are tied to the ocean. And when we go back to the sea, whether it is to sail or to watch it, we are going back from whence we came.
It is extraordinary what President Kennedy just offered. To the infinitesimal decimal point in our blood and in our tears is the exact same salt content of the seas. I'm sure that as most of you probably saw President Kennedy explaining his own personal attraction to the sea, you were probably reflecting back on some of your own memories of what it's like to go sailing, to go swimming, or to simply stare at the sea. We return from whence we came. I asked Athena Rosano of ISG World, who does most of the research for the Miami Report, to find me a photo of Florida taken from the International Space Station, and this is what we found. This is a peninsula surrounded by the sea. So whether we accept President Kennedy's logic or the wisdom of people like Carl Icahn, Jeff Bezos, and Ken Griffin, or the 180 companies that have committed to coming to South Florida since 2020, the longevity, the promise of the future population gains in Florida. It has music that no other state in this country can possibly sing. So have some faith. This is going to continue. Let's go to interest rates. In Q3, I believe that we offered sort of the same information. We suggested that interest rates would be somewhere around 6.7 to 6.5 by the end of Q2. Folks, we're already there. Interest rates have dropped by some 50 basis points since September 30th. So we went back to the same sources, Fannie Mae and the Mortgage Bankers Association and Wells Fargo. We asked for their revised forecasts on where mortgage rates are going. And you can see by the end of June of this year, they have them as low as 6.0. Yes, it is possible that by the end of this year, you're below 6% for 30-year fixed rate mortgages. Mortgage rates are going down. Mortgage rates are going down. We'll get into the effect of that will more than likely have on pricing in just a few minutes. But this is where interest rates are going. Interest rates went up, as we all know, because Jerome Powell needed to fight inflation. He believes he more or less has that under control. Now borrowing costs go down. Mortgages for your buyers, construction loans for developers. They're so anxious to break ground. Let's go to inventory now. Let's start with houses. You can see that the inventory at the end of Q4 of last year pretty much matches the inventory by the end of Q2. It didn't drop, it didn't rise. It looks like a pretty decent inventory of houses until you start peeling the onion, if you will. Here's what we've done. We broke them out in three different categories. We have an A house, a B house, and a C. I've reported on this in previous Miami reports. We thought we'd bring it back. An A house, it's 10 to 15 years old. It's on the water. It's on the Intracoastal. It's on the bay. Some are on the ocean. A B house, it's just like the A's. It's just not on the water. And everything else we kind of classify as a C. We are pretty low levels of A houses. In the Tri-County area, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and Miami, there's only 173. Last year, the average price was $18 million, an actual resale. The B houses, well, there's not many of them either. There's just over 1,000 of them in the Tri-County area. Last year, they traded for an average of $7 million. Most of the inventory of single-family homes are in the C houses, and that's actually really, really good news because most of the people that are coming here, like I'll say 70%, they're comfortable paying $1 million, $1.5 million for a house. $7 million is a little high, $18 million is very high. So what we were able to get from the real estate industry, from the real estate market, is the amount of inventory for single family homes that most of you really need, that most of the people that are coming here can afford to spend. That's a very, very healthy inventory number. I suspect that as mortgage rates continue to go down, you'll actually see more listings come into the market, more inventory, which we need, because sellers now believe they can start maximizing the profits that they see on their houses, and they're more than likely correct. Let's go to the appreciation rate. I think I showed this in Q3. The biggest appreciation rate we've ever had with single-family homes was between the year 2020 and 2021. People were moving here for reasons we well understand. It's the highest historic appreciation we've ever seen with single-family homes. However, last year wasn't so bad. The average house went up by 19%. It's pretty impressive when you consider what high mortgages were doing to presumably slow everything down. Didn't slow things down here in South Florida. Remember, this is probably the most active real estate market in the entire US. Condos. Here we saw much bigger relief in terms of inventory. We have more of it. Look at the difference between Q4 of 2022 and Q4 of 2023. Significant increase in condos. However, before we jump for joy with all that extra inventory, we started examining, we aged these condos. And here's what we discovered. Condos that are less than 10 years old, there's less than 1,000 of them. Most of them are in Miami-Dade County, not much in Broward, not much in Palm Beach. We have some that are less than 20 years old. Most of the increase that we saw in inventory, in fact, most of the condos that are on the market are 20 years plus. Now, this cuts two ways. The good news is the prices are very favorable. The other side of the coin, however, is, as all of you realtors know, condo associations now are under some tight scrutiny from mortgage lenders. They have to show proper reserve for replacements in their condominium association budgets. Many of the condos that are 20 years and older, they don't quite have their books and records totally up to speed. You know that when you resell a condo that's north of 20 years old, any condo, there's a questionnaire that we have to provide the condominium association for them to complete. The condos that are 20 years older and plus, they're having a hard time getting those questionnaires completed, and that's why condo sales in those older buildings are a bit slow. I've noticed that most of you are trading condos that are less than 10 years old. Your second choice are condos that are less than 20. That will more than likely continue. I encourage you to continue doing that because there's not a lot of inventory, particularly the stuff that's less than 10 years old. The ceilings inside the individual apartments are higher. The amenities are more modern. No wonder people are more attracted. And the condominium association's books and records are pretty much perfect, but there's not a lot of them. There's less than 1,000. Will we get more as interest rates continue to go down? Yes, but let's not ignore demand. Inventory goes up, but then more people move into South Florida, and I have a feeling it's going to be a zero-sum game this year. As it relates to prices, well, last year we saw the highest appreciation of condominium resale prices in the history of South Florida. The increase by an average of 22%. And what's incredibly impressive about that is the fact that mortgage rates were hovering between 7 and 8%, presumably slowing everything down. Well, it didn't slow down appreciation. And why? Because most of the demand is coming from Americans moving here from all four corners of the United States. We talked earlier that most of them are coming from California, Illinois, New York. Let's not forget New Jersey. Let's not forget Pennsylvania. Let's not forget Massachusetts. For that matter, every state in the country has somebody moving to South Florida last year. And yes, I know that that's going to continue this year. New construction. This is the segment of inventory that most of us are always holding on to, believing that this is going to fill the hole in the inventory numbers. We need more inventory to satisfy basic demand of people that are moving here. Well, what we did this time is we created this graphic to show you exactly how many pre-construction condominiums are being promoted here in South Florida since 2020. This map extends to the south down to Coconut Grove. It extends to the north all the way up to Hillsborough, including Pompano. There are 92 projects currently being promoted in South Florida, 66 of which are what we call traditional condos with serious rental restrictions. The other 26 are these short-term rentals that are either being managed by, it's either a condo hotel or they have some Airbnb platform attached to it. Nevertheless, we've put them under the umbrella of short-term rentals. We decided to take this map and make it a little easier on you. This next graphic shows where all the short-term rentals are. You can see that they're mostly clustered in what we call the downtown core, which is Brickell Avenue, downtown Miami, and Edgewater. There's not very many of them spread anywhere else in any other neighborhood here, as you can see by this graphic. The next one would be what I call the traditional condos, condominiums with strict rental policies. They're nicely distributed throughout most of South Florida. When you look at this map, you see a cluster in Bay Harbor, which has become a remarkably popular neighborhood. Fort Lauderdale, which has always been popular, and with Goldman Sachs opening up a regional office there last year, it's only gaining more popularity. And of course, a lot of you are hearing about the resurgence of Pompano, deservedly so. The government of Pompano, the city of Pompano, has spent some money on the infrastructure, beautifying the streets, upgrading restaurants. It's actually quite a nice little neighborhood. I encourage you to go check it out because it's not the Pompano that we once knew. Nevertheless, these are 66 traditional condos currently being promoted from Coconut Grove all the way up to Hillsborough. Now on this next slide, we're breaking out the price points of these 66 buildings. We have noticed that most Latin American buyers that were purchasing resale inventory last year were purchasing between $500,000 to $1.5. I just described 90% of sales from Latin America in the year 2023. So all we did was break out how many of the new construction traditional condos are priced between $500,000 and $1.5 million. There's only 9. 57 of them are $1.5 million and up. I'm encouraging developers that are watching this to pay attention to this. The more traditional condos we can create, selling between $500,000 to $1.5, maybe $2 million, there's a big demand for that, big demand. And when we can't satisfy a pre-construction buyer that's in that price point, it's not that they don't buy in Florida. They just don't buy in Miami. They go to Orlando. So please, real estate developers, please pay attention to this. There is a price sensitivity, particularly in Latin America, given the strength of the US dollar when you're talking about exchanging currencies. I know you understand. The next slide basically shows, now we're getting into deliveries. Of the 92 projects that are currently being promoted in South Florida, there are 18 that are actually going vertical. 18. 13 are traditional condos and 5 are what we call the short-term rentals. The other 74 have been waiting. Waiting for what? Waiting for 2 things. They've been waiting for construction costs to become more predictable, and now they are. Concrete, glass, and steel is in plenty supply, and now developers know what it will cost. Borrowing cost, that's what they've been waiting for. They've been waiting for interest rates to come down. Mortgage rates are coming down this year. Most developers that I speak to believe that the borrowing cost for a construction loan should drop by 75 basis points this year and maybe a full 100 basis points next year. That's 1.75% from where construction costs are now. That makes construction loans very doable in 2024. So it is my hope for you, for me, for everyone, that the 74 projects that have sold very well but have not yet gone vertical, in fact, do start to go vertical in 2024 going into 2025. From there, all we have to do is add time. How long will it take to finish these buildings so we can add this much needed inventory to the supply chain of residential real estate that we need here in South Florida? Well, we got some help a couple of weeks ago from Brickell Magazine. Brickell Magazine. They created a graphic that shows what the skyline of Brickell and downtown Miami could look like by the year 2030, assuming all of these buildings get built. Take a look at this. All we have to do is be patient and wait for 2030. Beautiful graphic, huh? Shows just how the potential of what this magnificent skyline could look like. Hong Kong's gonna have to take a back seat to the Miami skyline, don't you think? So here are the big takeaways. Demand, it's not only good, the promise of the future is better than probably any other state in this country. Mortgage rates are finally declining. Jerome Powell believes he's got inflation kind of by the ankles. So now you're going to see borrowing costs go down for mortgages, for construction lending. You're going to see a lot of activity in the real estate business this year. I still refer to supply shock because we are in such big need of housing, condominiums, and houses for all these people that are moving here, not to mention seats in charter schools and private schools. I'd like to end with one little Craig comment. Some of you have come to me and said that you've got buyers on the fence, but they think prices might be going down. Yeah, ever since we were little boys and girls, we all played on a seesaw, this little seesaw. And today as realtors, we're still playing on the same seesaw. Last year, this is mortgage rates and these are prices. Last year this happened. And you did expect prices to either stabilize or decline in some parts of the country. And in fact, they did. Not in South Florida, but in some parts of the country they did. Well, this is 2024. The seesaw is reversing. Mortgage rates are going down. And in my 40-plus year career selling real estate, every time mortgage rates go down, prices go up. How high will prices go up in response to lower mortgage rates? Where will mortgage rates be even at the end of Q1? We're going to tackle that in April when we unveil our outlook for 2024, right after the results of Q1. Until then, I want to wish you all the same. Lots of luck, blue skies, and looking forward to seeing everybody in April. Until then, bye-bye.